Hi, my dear Rasta family. It is your weekly forecast starting on 27th of May until 31st of May. So let's cover the very last few days of May. It might look like we only have got kind of like 4 days to cover, but there is a lot of punch in it. So let's get into it. So 27th, we have got a bit of an astrological break, but on the 28th, we have got Venus in Cancer squaring Saturn in the sign of Aries. Now it is happening on 11 degree. And this is a bit of a structural tension between the deep desire for emotional safety and an urgent, kind of impatient drive to assert independence. So, when the planet of relationships, values, and finances faces friction from the planet of boundaries, delays, reality checks, we encounter a classic kind of brake versus gas pedal dynamic. So Venus in Cancer is seeking connections. It wants to protect. It is vulnerable. It values comfort. It wants to nest, nurture, and hold on to what is familiar and emotionally safe. Often Venus goes down on a memory lane in the sign of Cancer. Now, Saturn in Aries demands self-reliance, boundaries, individual action, hard reality checks, hard work as well. It enforces rules with an impatient, sharp edge, often prioritizing duty, personal survival over emotional comfort. And that's the real challenge here. We have got two planets squaring off. So the immediate environment feels restrictive. Saturn acts as a cold wall to that Venusian soft protective shell, forcing us therefore to look at where our emotional needs are hitting up against harsh real world limits or even our individual responsibilities. This might talk to us about an emotional rejection, for example. I mean, you might be reaching out to a partner, a family member, or even a close friend, looking for comfort, reassurance, or a cozy connection. And instead of that warmth that Venus is requiring, you are met with a busy, distracted, kind of like a defensive response from someone. So Saturn in Aries triggers that fear of vulnerability, causing people to pull away or focus on their own urgent tasks. This is not a permanent breakdown of a relationship, though. It is a temporary boundary checkpoint. It forces us to build internal emotional security rather than relying on entirely on others to kind of soothe us. Or Venus represents finances as well. So we have to be very like clear on our budget. Maybe you are applying, for example, for a loan and then it comes with certain type of delayed approvals. Maybe you are trying to move forward with a financial investment that feels comfortable, emotionally satisfying, or you pitch a creative project that relies heavily on a supportive, collaborative environment, or even I can imagine that you are applying for housing benefits or you are ready to move. And there is a deadline with that, but unfortunately, it might get a bit delayed, or you get simply a hard no, or just that significant delay because the project lacks, let's say, a solid independent foundation. The numbers might not be adding up. Saturn demands that we cut off the fluff. This transit forces a realistic audit of resources. It tells us that emotional attachments to an idea or an asset isn't enough. It needs a structured strategy. I can even imagine, because Venus is often connected to self-expression as well. So imagine that you sit down to create something heartfelt, like you are making this super nice meal to your family members. And, but unfortunately, maybe it is not going to become the best version of your cooking. Maybe your internal voice tells you that your work isn't good enough, it's not fast enough, it's not impactful enough, and so on. So, a key takeaway of this aspect is not a day for pushing through emotional closed doors. It's a day to respect boundaries, audit financial and emotional realities, and understand that temporary distance or delays are simply redirecting us to build a stronger emotional foundation. Now, on the next day, Ceres enters Gemini. Let's just actually have a look at how long that series is going to be there. So you can see it's actually moving approximately about 3 degrees each week. So series will be there approximately about 13th of August. So Ceres is entering sign of Gemini. Ceres is the archetype of cultivation, nurturing, self-worth, sustainability, food, grief, sorrow. So it shifts from that earthy, very deliberate Taurus into this airy, more fast-paced sign, Gemini. So the way we feed our mind is going to be one of the major topic. The way we process security, the way we care for ourselves, most likely undergoes a major shift. Of course, it will, because Ceres is going to be making a conjunction to Uranus, which I'm also going to be talking about, but only next week. You know, up until now, Ceres in Taurus focused on tangible, the physical safety, money in the bank, food on the table, how much we nurture our physical body. What food do we put in that? What's the fuel within that body? It was focusing on physical touch, potentially predictable routines. But it's shifting now. We have fed the body. Now we have to be feeding the mind as well. So that nurturing becomes more intellectualized, intellectual stimulation. Maybe I realize that, okay, I've got the great body, but my mind is not at the right place. So I need to study, I need to do networking, I need to have a diverse intake of data. And those are going to be becoming the primary sources of comfort. We move from asking, is this physically safe, to asking, is this mentally stimulating? Um, imagine this as information becomes food. So if our minds are bored, our physical and emotional vitality drops. However, because Gemini splits focus, the challenge here is avoid consuming low kind of value, like that mental junk food, really. So this could show information overload, endless scrolling, superficial gossips that leaves us feeling scattered rather than genuinely sustained. Um, I associate series with self-care, and I find it as a very important asteroid, really. So, in the sign of Taurus, Ceres, if it had to be sitting for a long hours, it was okay with it. But now it's more of like eating on the go. Or maybe you have been sticking to a rigid, repetitive wellness routine, and then it's just draining. You find yourself wanting to listen to an educational podcast while cooking, or needing to switch up your daily routine every few days just to stay interested. It's about staying informed as well. So what really gives you that self-care is variety and curiosity. So doing monotonous regime most likely will backfire. Instead, nurture your body by keeping your brain engaged. Read a chapter of a book during a break. Try new recipes from scratch. Like I said, series is about cooking. Let's say you can do a cooking show as well if you want to. But also, in the business world, this could really talk to us about marketing strategies as well. Um, so you might find yourself kind of sending quick newsletters, recording kind of these bite-sized audio updates, teaching short, highly practical workshops. I think that's the future anyway. Series in Gemini sustains wealth and business through dialogue and teaching. Um, it's an ideal time to build an educational material, diversify your offers, use clear, accessible language to connect with your students or clients. Gemini represents siblings or communities as well. So this might be conversations with siblings, neighbors, or close peers. Might be taking on a much more prominent role actually. Emotional support is given and received through the exchange of ideas, logistics, and words when it comes to series in the sign of Gemini. Maybe it's just a simple supportive text message or a quick catch up call, can offer so much comfort with series in Gemini to many of us rather than those huge grand emotional gestures. So your mind needs high quality fuel. Choose information that teaches your practical skills and stabilizes your self-worth rather than content that leaves your nervous system buzzing and unfocused. Talking about studying, I'm going to be having the relocation course coming up, and I would like to invite you to consider joining the relocation course. This is 16 weeks, and it will be all about finding the best possible place to live so that you can be happy. And if you go on my website, AstroViktor.com, you will be able to see the full syllabus, but you need to have very good understanding of a natal chart, planet, sign, houses, aspects. That's mandatory because I'm not going to be teaching you basics in that course. So check it out. On the same day, 29th, Chiron actually moves onto the energetic degree of Aries. That's the 29 degree. This is going to be the very first time when it happens, and we are going to be having two more occasions because Chiron will be shifting into the sign of Taurus in a short while in June, but it will just be there for a few months and then it's going to come back into the sign of Aries. But Chiron being on 29 degree, it might be the time to start looking at in the next couple of weeks, 3 weeks actually, what's going to go down in that Aries part of your chart. A 29 degree is a high stake degree, urgent culmination point, especially when it comes to your personal healing journey, but on the collective level as well, around identity, survival, self assertion, something that has been developing since 2018. It is reaching the climax. Chiron in Aries has exposed wounds related to our right to exist and independence, and that I've got the right to take up space, basically, and I've got the right to assert my true desires. It did bring up fears of inadequacy, overcompensation through aggressive independence, or suppressing our raw instincts to avoid conflict, or having to protect my right to exist, so I'm gonna fight back as well. So imagine the 29 degrees kind of like a pressurized bottleneck there. This is a not the final wrap up, but we are getting there of that wound of the self before Chiron makes its initial preview into Taurus next month. It's kind of like a normal apology type of energy that I'm feeling here. I'm not going to apologize for being me. You know, uh, Maybe you encounter a situation that perfectly mimics an old childhood trauma, a past trauma, where you felt small, helpless, forced to like be a toddler in a way, that you had to be minimizing your presence just to keep the peace. And instead of folding and reacting with defensive anger, actually you just have got the clarity that Chiron wants you to have the clarity. It wants you to speak up, state your boundaries, state your truth without needing the external validation, without apologizing. The energetic degree forces a breakthrough by triggering a very familiar crisis. The medicine of Chiron at 29 degrees is realizing that you no longer need to fight for your right to exist. You simply choose to exist fully, authentically, in an unapologetic version that you are going to be showing, closing the door on those old survival patterns that no longer serve you. Maybe, the lesson here is courage. Chiron turns the wound of not being good enough into the greatest teaching tool. Standing in your own authority means owning your unique flaws and strength as well. So, under this transit, risking public vulnerability by sharing your true methods is exactly what builds a genuine trust with your audience or students. But I also believe that this transit tests how you handle anger. 29 degree can be quite explosive, and but it's the final degree of the sign, so it's about releasing that suppressed frustration. And we have to be releasing it because if we are not careful with it, it's going to build up and then there's going to be a huge explosion there. Maybe it's about stopping to fight external ghosts and realize that the real victory is within you. True strength under energetic Aries is knowing when to walk away from a useless fight. And walking away is not about defeat. It's about seeing that what's the point in doing that. My time is valuable enough not to waste it. Now, still on the 29th of May, so this is a busy day, yes. We are going to be having asteroid Hera entering the sign of Virgo. So let's just have a look at together. Let's find Hera. Astrological number is 103. If you want to be looking up where it is in your natal chart. Now, Hera moves approximately about 2 degrees each week. So it's a little bit of a slower type of asteroid, and I'm going to be giving you the final dates when Hera is going to be moving further. So you will see that this is happening very at the end of August, exactly on 29th of August. Okay, so let me just come back. And then we are going to be going back to our chart. So here you go. So, Hera, one more time. It's on the 29th. Obviously, Hera is leaving that very expressive Leo and then enters this analytical, system-orientated sign, Virgo. Now, Hera represents the archetype of partnership, actually, marital dynamics, commitments, how we handle power structures with our closest alliances. While Hera was in Leo, the focus in relationships was on appreciation, recognition, drama, pride as well. So alliances were evaluated based on how much they made us feel special, celebrated, respected. Now, as Hera moves into Virgo, the standard for a successful partnership shifts completely from that theatrical romance to more practical utility, more mutual support. The commitment is no longer measured by grand declarations and gifts and all those type of stuff. It is measured by the acts of service. Are you going to do the washing up? Are you going to be changing the bed sheet? How reliable are you? Are we sharing, our daily operations? So under this ingress, we look at our contracts, our agreements, our partnerships through very highly critical lenses, actually. The core question is in the sign of Leo was, do I feel loved? And in the sign of Virgo, it is about, does this partnership actually work efficiently on a day-to-day level? Um, Hera in Virgo teaches that true commitment lives in the tiny little details. So we need to be sitting down and renegotiate household roles. We need to be synchronizing calendars. We need to clean up habits, basically. Um, but Virgo also rules optimization. So under this transit, a lack of clarity in certain type of partnerships can create friction. So it's about creating a flawless system, setting very clear boundaries, documenting who is responsible for what. We need a scheduling wall like a scheduling, like not a wall, what's the name? Like a board on the wall, for example, in the kitchen. And okay, Mikey, you pick up the kids today. Okay, Alicia, you are going to be making the dinner tonight, so that we become more organized about it. We need to be careful of that fix it trap. The shadow side of Hera in Virgo is conditional commitment based on perfectionism. So, wanting to marry a project rather than accepting a person. Um, so, let's not be falling into that trap. But I think Asteroid Hera reminds us that strong commitments are built on reliable infrastructure. Um, okay, next stop. It's on the 30th now. And then we've got Circe entering the sign of Leo. Okay, then we're gonna have to go back again. And let's just find Circe. So Circe's astrological number is 34. And then let's see how long Circe is going to be staying in the sign of Leo. So Circe is moving approximately about 3 degrees a week as well, as you can see. Sometimes a little bit more than 3 degrees, but an average of 3 degrees. What did I do there? Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, right there. So Circe is again going to be in the sign of Leo approximately until 4th of August. Okay, so let's just talk about, it was in the sign of Cancer. And Cancer is a very protective sign, right? It's a quiet sign. But then we move into this expressive Leo. Now, Circe represents our personal point of persuasion, facilitation, how we lean into our inner charisma to influence our environment. She's named after the mythological sorcerer. Circe shows where we possess a natural magnetism that can either assist others or completely captivate an audience. So, in the sign of Cancer, our power of persuasion was quiet, intuitive. Maybe we try to influence someone by crying or being quiet. It's all about emotional resonance. Maybe we wanted to influence situations by making people feel safe, nurtured, emotionally understood. Now, in the sign of Leo, that magic becomes highly visible, very dramatic, very performative. Influence is no longer wielded from behind the scenes, it is projected from center stage. This is about charisma, nerve, talent, creative flair, and unapologetic self expression. All those are the primary tools of persuasion. So, um, I think people with heavy Leo interests are going to be naturally drawn to your confidence, your warmth, or what a good authority figure you are. The challenge here is to ensure that this magnetic influence is used to uplift, to inspire, to facilitate growth for others, rather than turning into kind of a purely ego-driven like spectacle. Um, Circe in Leo rewards visibility. So if you hide your light or, you dilute your message right now, your audience will tune out. So this is a perfect time to dress the part, step in front of the camera, speak with absolute conviction. It's about enthusiasm, and that becomes contagious under this transit. I also believe that this transit thrives on presentation and prestige. So don't be afraid to elevate that aesthetic of your business, of your body, depending on where Leo cusp of your chart is. But Circe in Leo can represent bigger success. It's about presenting an offer to something, but usually it's about premium products, for example. Um, and I think Circe in Leo uses the superpower there is warmth. So acknowledging and shining a spotlight on the talent of others. True influence under displacement comes from using your platform to make everyone around you feel like a royalty. On the 31st, Mercury out of bound is making a sextile to Chiron. So that's going to be happening on an erotic degree, of course, 29 degree. So Mercury being out of bound until June 14th, I made a separate video about it if you do not remember. You know, the mind is operating outside the traditional boundaries. Mercury in Gemini, the thinking becomes very uninhibited. It's brilliant, it's unconventional. Minds operate outside the box. It is often not looking at the data. It has got radical ideas. This is about non-linear solutions that normally we wouldn't go for. Now, Chiron, we have spoken about that already, but that's an intense pressure, forcing a major urgent culmination around our wounds of visibility, identity, power. It's a sextile. It's an opening. It's like opening a doorway to be able to talk out, for example, our pain, the way we were hurt. It's um, it's an outside the box brilliance of like realizing how the healing process can actually happen. It also tells you that words become medicine. It's like that out of bound Mercury is like an objective outsider who looks at the long-standing painful identity wound and says, "Oh, have you ever realized how simple the solution actually is if you just look at it from this completely different angle?" So it can really provide that healing moment, that exact breakthrough. Says that if you start talking about your pain, then actually you are going to start your personal healing journey. Um, Mercury is not playing now by the normal rules, so it can bypass your subconscious defense mechanism and hand you the intellectual key to unlock those years old emotional cage. Um, this actually could be a super good day for writers, teachers, and even astrologers as well, because with an out-of-bound Mercury, kind of your vocabulary is unrestricted. You might even become more like sharp, witty. Your words can become naturally therapeutic. So this is brilliant for client work or even posting certain type of videos, for example. Maybe this is about talking or talking about a very sensitive topic and speaking the absolute truth in a way that bypasses people's walls. When Mercury is out of bound, the rules of logic bend. So don't limit your strategic thinking to the way things have always been done. The sextile to Aries rewards bold, intellectual risk, pioneering actions. The weirder or more unconventional the idea sounds at first, the more likely it is actually to contain the actual fix that you need in your life. On the 31st, Sun is in Gemini, sextiling Palasatini in Aries, and trine Juno in Aquarius at the same time. And on the same day, Mercury actually will enter Cancer as well. So, Sun in Gemini, sextile Pallas in Aries. Sun is vitality, focus. connecting with the archetype of strategy, pattern recognition, problem solving in that very pioneering Aries. So I think it's about mental clarity, allowing us to see a big picture, map out tactical solutions to any type of problems. While Sun in Gemini trine Juno in Aquariusly, that would really talk to us about a contractual agreement or spotlighting our alliances. It illuminates how our individual goals align beautifully with our long-term collective commitment and even professional partnerships. Now we do have got Mercury entering Cancer. Um, it's still out of bound, remember that, but we left at high speed Gemini, and then that Mercury starts thinking about that protective, more nostalgic, more emotional waters of Cancer. So our thinking shifts from purely collecting data to process how the data actually feels. It's about remembering the past and remembering the good and the bad side as well at the same time. Um, I think this is a brilliant aspect pattern for planning. Maybe it's planning a short trip, for example, with family members. I think the strategy you map out potentially something that will eventually gain the support of your allies, business partners, or even your community and the friends as well. This could be a brilliant day to sign contracts, finalizing agreements, launching collaborative frameworks, and so on. I think Mercury in Cancer changes the rules of engagement for the next few weeks. This is not about intellectual arguments. This is not about winning people over. This is more about emotionally being resonant with someone. It's about speaking to the people's core needs for safety, belonging, and trust. It's not just about providing information, but how can I become emotionally resonant with others? This is brilliant to negotiate the logistics, secure commitments. Once Mercury enters Cancer later in the day, we can really anchor those commitments by celebrating the personal bond, the mutual trust, something that is going to be keeping the partnership together. So, as you can see, even though we only covered few days, 4 days, but it's actually quite a packed full finale of the month. One other thing that I would like to mention is that the moon went out of bound recently. Moon started its out of bound journey on 1 degree of Sagittarius. So I want to show you that too, okay, so that you can see. So you can see the out of bound planets here, and whenever it's in purple in declination, then it is out of bound. So it started on May 30th on 1 degree of Sagittarius, and it's going to be actually finishing its out of bound period on June 3rd, somewhere around 20 degree, 21 degree of Capricorn. So it's 2 days in the sign of Sagittarius and then 2 days in the sign of Capricorn. So you're going to have to be looking at the Capricorn part of your chart as well as the Sagittarius part of your chart because our emotional responses within that area of life could become a little bit more reactive. An out of bound Sagittarius moon can have a lot of new ideas as well. Just remember that Ceres newly ingressed, so that out of bound moon is going to be opposing, for example, Uranus exactly when it goes out of bound, meaning that our personal desire to escape, to run away, to shut the door on other people's faces is highly erratic. Our emotional responses with Moon and Uranus opposition is highly erratic. So, have a great week, everyone. And now let's break it down for all 12 signs. Take care. Bye bye.